Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve.
Hi and welcome back. This is episode 32. Alex and I we've had a bit of a different idea today. So you guys kind of come back each week and you listen to both Alex's talk about money and life and personal development, wealth creation, etc. But trying to figure out who we actually are might be a bit of a mystery to you. So we've decided to do more of a personalized episode. This one is Alex the accountant's one, and I'll do one for next week. So Alex is going to take the lead on it, and he's going to talk about how he became an accountant, some of the steps that are involved, things that he's tried and have worked, other things that he's tried and has not worked, and really to get a bit more of a flavour of the person behind the voice. Alex, is there anything else we need to say, do you think, before we kick off, or no?
No, I think yeah, we can kick off and make a start and see where we get to. Um, yeah, I'm hoping that this is bit of an interesting episode, a little bit different to what we've done before, and I guess we'll provide a bit of insight into I guess my career. I guess one caveat is, the routes into certainly into accounting. They're quite fluid, and there's lots of different new routes that are opening up. So there's lots of entry points into it as a career. But I can certainly, my plan is to just give you a kind of a walkthrough of, yeah, the kind of qualifications I did, the type of jobs I was doing. I'm sure I can mention the company names. It's all on my LinkedIn profile anyway. Um, and Alex, I'd love for you to ask any questions. I mean, I've been doing this for I don't even know how long, 12 years now. So I'd be keen to, I get quite invested in it. So any questions you got, please shoot. But I can start with my kind of how I originally, why I wanted to get into accountancy in the first place. And I must say, it was only really, so I went to university. I did a bachelor's degree in kind of management and finance, and then I went on to do further study and did a master's degree in financial management. And it was kind of during that, doing my master's, that I started to explore lots of different career paths. So before I actually went to university, I wanted to start my own business, and I'd had a couple of very small ventures that didn't really work. One was t-shirt printing, and I had like some designs made by one of the guys at school, and we went to try and sell them around different shops, but it didn't really take off. And then also trying to start a magazine before university, which didn't a car magazine, which didn't work either. And so I went to university, and I've always enjoyed numbers. I say not numbers. I've always enjoyed money, quite frankly, and business and finance and investing. I've always had like the books that I was reading as a kind of a teenager were always quite money focused and self-help focused, I guess, as opposed to reading novels and stuff, to the disappointment of my parents who wanted me to read all the classics. But went to university, got doing my masters, and I found I almost wanted to have a really good grounding in finance as a career. And with accounting, the more I spoke to different people at careers fairs, it's quite clear that it's a very good baseline as a job to have, because it's almost, they call them like, accountants are known as like the engineers of business in, sometimes. And you really get under the skin of how a business works by looking at the numbers. And so that's, from the revenue it earns, the type of cost that it incurs, how profitable it is, the different ratios that you use to the balance sheet, and how you go about funding the company. So you almost get under the skin of it by looking at the numbers. And when you're looking at numbers, you take a lot of, you almost see the true picture. There's no kind of salesy spiel around it. And so I decided, as a starting point in a business career, accounting would be a really good starting point. And if you are keen on, if you've looked into this before, there's kind of three main accountancy like professional bodies that you can train with. Two of them you would do like a qualification called it's like the ACA and one is ACCA. And these are if you want to go and become like an auditor, so you'd go and work for, like PwC, Deloitte, um, Ernst and Young, and KPMG. Those are like the big four, and they will go into a company, test the controls around the financials, and then if you ever read an annual report, there's a section around with their financial statements, and there's usually an auditor's opinion before that. So they will go in and say, it shows like a true and fair view. So as an investor or as a user of that financial information, you can be comfortable that it's correct. So that auditor is one of the kind of a core route, but that's not something I wanted to do. The other route is called CIMA, which stands for the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. And this is a bit more hands-on, almost becoming an accountant within a company, helping it become more profitable. You still do the financial statements, probably not you probably won't know the ins and outs of the financial statements as much as an auditor does in terms of how, the financial, like the standards are applied. But you're very much partnering, usually a business person on the other side. So it's a nice combination of financial kind of rigor, plus you can in a position to help influence a business. And so that was much more down my skill set and was much more interesting than becoming a kind of Big Four auditor. So I graduated in so I finished my master's I think it was like November 2011, and then we graduated in January 2012. And so throughout that time, I was just applying for loads and loads of graduate schemes. I wanted to do a graduate scheme. So before I go into that, so with accountancy qualifications, on a general, they take 3 years to do. And it's a combination of exams and practical experience. And then you combine the two to become a chartered accountant. And I wanted to do that in a large company. And these graduate schemes are very good in that they rotate you around the business. So you'll see lots of different parts of the business during your 3 years in parallel to doing your exams. So it's a really good way of, well, one, seeing different parts of a business, but you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the things that you do and don't like, and at the same time you're qualifying. So I was a part and parcel of this is you get a load of rejections. But I was lucky enough to land a position on the Sky graduate program. So this started in 2012, which is mad. It's 12 years ago that I started. It still feels like I only joined the other week, and I'd started my career there. So within that, I worked on the technology finance team. So this was kind of buying like servers and laptops for staff and installing like vending machines for IT equipment and kind of quite cool stuff like that. I then went to the Sky News business and we ran like the P&L for the Sky News channel. And following that, did some work in the supply chain team. So this was managing the cost base of anything. If you think of a Sky installation, the engineer will turn up to your house and their van will be full of kit. There'll be cables, dishes, like screws, nuts and bolts, anything like that. All of that cost, I was in charge of reporting on the costs of those and looking at ways to improve efficiency. I then worked for Sky Sports. So this was kind of looking at the cost of producing sports content. So it's not the cost of purchasing the rights to show the sports, but it was once we've got those rights and we go and, they've got to send staff out to sporting events. You've got to often build, if you've got commentators in stadiums, sometimes some of the old stadiums don't have even like stands there. So you've got to build like scaffolding and build your own stand. And then often outside of a football match, if you ever go, you'll see these huge trucks with loads of wires coming out and satellites coming out of the roof. So they are kind of what they call outside broadcast trucks. So I used to look at the cost of those and support the procurement teams in kind of renegotiating some of the contracts. So really interesting part of the business. And kind of during that time, I also qualified then as a chartered management accountant. That is as a process in itself is you kind of have your full-time day job, and then it for me was evenings, and so it was like so I used to do them in blocks. So it would be every other 6 months, I'd basically have to go to college after work and at weekends, and you did 3 exams during that period. And you kind of go with a cohort of your colleagues who are also on the grad scheme, and you basically finish work, get on the train, go into London Waterloo, and go to a BPP college is what I went to. So it was all organised by the company. You just basically turn up, and the tutors there were excellent. You get through a lot of content in the evenings, and then you start working again in the morning. So it's quite intense. It's definitely you have to be aware that it's quite a time commitment before you kind of embark on it. But I certainly don't regret doing any of it. It's actually I look back quite fondly on doing that. And then yeah, so I qualified, and then I decided to change company. So I went to go and work for Deloitte. So I went into their consulting business where we go and help different clients on, it was mainly financial kind of strategy in their financial strategy like practice. So we look at ways of improving performance and measuring performance of different businesses. So I worked there for 18 months. And then following on from that, I went to join BT. So I was approached for a job there. I worked in the business to business part of BT. So I was in charge of monitoring the profitability of selling wide area networks. So if you ever go into a company and you plug into an intranet, that intranet is provided usually by a handful of suppliers, and BT being one of them. And so that was kind of working with the sales teams to kind of make sure we're writing good business and making sure we're profitable. And then what I found was I was a bit of a strange move from the outside, but I decided to pursue another financial qualification, and this time in corporate treasury. And so corporate treasury I see it as a complement to accountancy, and in a way, what treasury looks at is how a company goes about funding itself. So it borrows money from kind of the capital markets. You can raise shares. It's looking at, and so it's the process and how do you balance shareholders and bondholders? What's the right level of debt for the company? What different banking facilities are available that can be used? And so it's very kind of external facing. Also looking at managing some of the interest rate risk and foreign exchange risk that can come about, and kind of it's a very different but complementary way from looking at finance. So for me, I wanted to broaden out into that area, and so I just started studying off my own bat. So I was paid for the courses myself. I didn't go to college. I just studied myself, again, weekends and evenings. And I think one thing that does happen is because you get used to working in weekends and in the evenings or using some of your spare time, I just kind of carried that on. Um, and this definitely isn't a route that everybody goes down at all. It's quite unusual, but I almost see if you're essentially the finance director of a company, you not only need to know how good and how your internal operations are efficient, but also how you look to investors and how the best way is of funding yourself and managing risk across the organization. And so I did that myself, and at the same time got a job in the treasury team at BT, which was really interesting. So I worked a lot with the bankers that we used, looking at variety of different like global companies that BT had, and kind of trying to get from injecting capital into them to make them solvent, to getting dividends out of them and moving cash around the world. implementing new banking systems and solutions. It was really varied and really different role. So I really enjoyed that and felt it really complemented it. And then that leads me to where I am now. So yeah, so that my career at BT was like 5 years. It was all the way through COVID, as well, which was a bit bonkers. But looking back, that kind of career progression, taking, the onus to develop myself on kind of with the treasury qualification, the breadth of role that I'd done then led me to where I am now, which is working at Amazon, working in the advertising. So I'm in finance, but working for the advertising business in Amazon. And without but when I was doing the interview, so the interview process at Amazon is tough. There's a lot of interviews and a lot of questions, but having that career and the breadth that I could kind of pull on essentially allowed me to get the job. Um, and it really helps me in my day to day. Because I guess one thing with accounting, going kind of back to the beginning, is people can sometimes stay in one type of job role for a long time. And you kind of then just end up having like 1 years of experience, but just multiplied 10 times. Like you've had the same 10 years, is the same 1 year, but 10 times. Whereas I almost want to look at it opposite and say, well, if I've like, realistically, I've had 12-year career so far, and every one of those years has been different. And that's only to the benefit of me and to my future career. So, that's the type of, and ultimately my roles have spread from, managing a cost base. I've looked at headcount. I've looked at business cases for investing in data centers to now, trying to optimize ads revenue for Amazon. So it's a really different, broad spectrum of work. And accountancy at the outset might sound quite dull and quite boring, but you truly do get to see very different parts of a business and really understand it. And by just focusing on the numbers, and you kind of can really get a really good understanding of that company. And then, you work with some great stakeholders and learn a lot whilst you're there and can really make a difference. So that is my monologue of my career and in accounting. If you're interested in it, even as a baseline career or like a stepping stone into the world of business, accountancy is a very good way of getting in. I've got friends and old colleagues who have gone to started off in finance but have gone to do completely different things outside of finance. Like there definitely isn't a rule that you have to stay there. So gives you that solid kind of foundation for a career in business. So I definitely don't regret doing it. I'm very proud to call myself like a chartered accountant. I would definitely, if you're unsure about if you're maybe coming into starting university or coming up to finishing, there's definitely, it's a very good way of getting into the world of business. So that was, yeah, my route, and I hope that's provided some help and maybe a bit more color as to what the world of accounting can do.
Well, I've honestly, I've just sat here and listened to you, and I've just literally just been drinking tea, like amazed at every sentence you said, because I genuinely didn't believe that accountancy could be that wider kind of scope and going places and doing things. But when you think about it, without effective money management for businesses, they would all close. There wouldn't be any continuation of businesses. So all the brands that you and I, Alex, we use every day, the brands we come into contact with, the companies that sell to other companies to make the world go round, none of that would be possible without people doing jobs in those sectors. And honestly, I thought before when when someone says like that they're an accountant, I feel like they're just a single person. They work in a little office somewhere, um, probably on I don't know on one of the top floors or something, and the office might or might not have any windows. And then in there, like, looking at loads of different statements and like, can we pay people this month? Do we need to do this? What do we need to do with that? Sit in a meeting, blah blah blah. And I didn't realize it was quite so broad. And you've mentioned all these extra things um, about it, and I've been furiously writing a list of questions, and if you wouldn't mind, I'll just ask a couple back to you. So, um, firstly, you mentioned ACA and ACCA. What do they stand for?
I knew you were going to ask that. I think one is, I'm just going to Google it now.
Oh, okay.
I always remember, I always forget the exact ones because I didn't do them. So
Okay, fine.
ACCA is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants,
Right.
and ACA is the um, Affordable Care Act, apparently.
I know about
Uh,
that
uh,
one.
yeah, I think it's the Association of Chartered Accountants, I think it is. Um,
Okay, so there's a difference between certified and chartered, perhaps, in there. For me as a layman, I don't really know.
Yeah, they're all seen as like interchangeable. So if you ever look at job
Yeah.
roles, it will be one of those professional bodies that you've studied with to get there. But yeah, that's
Oh, that's interesting. So it's similar to like in mental health nursing. I'll do my own kind of version of this next week, but we have things like RMN, which is registered mental health nurse. You can have RMHN, which is the same thing. You can have RNLD, so learning disabilities, or you can have RNID for intellectual disability. It's the same. Um, I'm technically all of those, one of them and all of them combined. So loads of different jobs you see have those in. Like it's just the same thing. You can do any of that with slightly different specialisms. I'll admit, but okay, that's helpful. The other thing I've written down is you said you did your masters or finished your masters 2011 and degree before that. So were you studying kind of 2008 during the financial crash?
I was because I say my dream career would have been to go into like asset management and investment management, but literally started in so it was started my undergrad in 2007 to then 2010, and then it was
Right.
2010 to 2011 is when I did my masters. But yeah, it was an absolute chaos. It was a job market during that time.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard people saying they graduated into that kind of time, and it doesn't really matter the qualifications you had. It was just double hard all the time. And did you just go into like a university lecture one day, and then like during that crash, and your lecturer was just like, "Well, guys, this is a real sharp lesson in the realities of life." Did it get mentioned, or is it kind of
It did, yeah, and I mean it was I did my dissertation actually on the impact of the financial crash on credit unions, which because of mainstream a lot of the mainstream banks went under, there was more of a prevalence of the credit unions, so people turn into credit unions to which are very much old school building societies, but they're limited. I mean, I don't know what the rules are now. They may have changed, but they were limited by how much interest they could charge people, which is very positive in that
hmm,
because it's usually the high risk clients that the credit unions would attract. So the people that are used to pay,
right?
essentially trying to get them away from doorstop lenders.
Fine. So it's an alternative to someone who perhaps can't use a regular bank for what poor credit history or whatever reasons.
Yeah, so where like the with the financial crash, a lot of the banks went under. They like
Hmm.
tightened up lending policies so much that you had to be, essentially you didn't need money in order to put, you'd be there, you'd be all right to borrow, but if you needed it, they basically wouldn't lend it. And so
Right.
credit unions kind of filled the gap in between. But I think some of them um were have like gone under because they were capped by law how much interest they could charge, but sometimes that isn't enough to then recoup and actually make any profit. So
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
sustainable to run your business, keep the lights on, pay your people,
exactly. And
right?
these weren't, they're they're not huge Wall Street banks.
No, they're little offices places, isn't it, with a couple of people in.
Yeah, exactly. But but to your first point, just on was it mentioned? It was a huge topic and very much like it changed. It was a huge debating topic for a lot of stuff. So, but that was quite scary because everyone's there basically wanting to go into some form of finance or banking, and it was whereas 10 years 10 years before that would be easy to just you go off the production line of university and into a bank, whereas it was
Yeah, no problem. But now it's a bit more dicey. I mean, I don't even remember where I was in 2008. I'm pretty sure I was at college doing some kind of computing course that's now totally redundant. And I don't remember hearing about it on the news. Like my mum and dad didn't speak to me about it. I just didn't, I don't think it even factored for me at all. Um, and I don't remember anything vivid about it whatsoever because this was way before me learning anything about finances or money or anything. Yeah, okay. I have some more cues just on what you mentioned. Firstly, there's many routes in, and you can really diversify yourself once you've kind of got your foot in the door. So it's like a base level, not so, I don't mean to make it sound basic, like a base level qualification to get to a certain level. And then, like you've said, you've worked for kind of Sky and BT and the news team, advertising, and that you're kind of but it's broad, isn't it? If someone says I'm an accountant, the last thing I think about is them doing advertising for Sky and budgets and stuff like that.
yeah, it's super broad, and I think it's a bit of a misconception of because I guess there is if you go down the route of becoming an auditor, that is very like for me it's quite it doesn't suit my personality type. I just find that's very much
Sitting in a
in a
boring
in a
office with no
in a
windows.
windowless room, yeah,
Yeah.
like matching an invoice down to a kind of cash flow statement type stuff.
Ooh,
Whereas
detective work almost.
oh, it is, and nobody likes to get questions from an auditor, so people are very not exactly forthcoming to them. But um, but yeah, I've worked in across and a lot of it is in like it is financial planning type work. So looking at what's like revenue projections or costings, what things can we do to either make more or do things for less, and how does that then impact the overall business? And if you imagine, one thing which surprised me is when I first started, I just assumed, I started at Sky. So Sky's a huge company. It was multi-billion dollar revenues and cost bases. And I just assumed you'd look after all of it. But actually, it's a tiny, tiny subset of one line. You maybe not even look after one line on the financial statements that you would see, like an investor would see in the annual report. So it's really disaggregated. Um, but you become an expert in that area. And
Yeah, and it's niche skills that will get you paid, won't it? Like if you're one of the top people in the UK or whatever that can do this particular thing for big business, that it means you're competing with less people to work in that kind of field.
yeah, and that's it. And I've always been, I love to learn new stuff anyway and experience new things. But I've always found that by moving around and trying different areas, you do build quite a lot of resilience in that you've seen, like most things that come up in a job, I've seen now before. So it's just quite in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I think to the point of certainly in an area of artificial intelligence coming in to take on roles which are very repeatable and standardized, you want to, I guess, be in a position where you can almost be dropped in as a bit of a problem solver, and no matter what is there, you've got the skill set to be able to help solve it. In because if you just do the same type of role every day, like 100% in 10 years' time, a computer will be doing that.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing of whether in terms of personal growth, learning over time, over a 10-year period, you can go from somewhere, and if you build every year, you build from year one to two to three, all the way up to 10, you've got 10 different years of experience. Whereas if you just do the same 10 years and you repeat year one 10 times, that's one of them gives you the same result, the repetitive one, and the other one gives you like all this extra breadth, and you can do a lot more with it. And I think that's what kind of I've learned from you because I really didn't know anything about it. I was willfully ignorant about anything kind of accountancy based, and here we are, 31 episodes, 32 episodes in, and I'm learning all this extra stuff from you. So I've got one other question I've written down. So you've said you've studied a lot, um, kind of through uni, through masters. You also mentioned studying evenings, weekends to get some extra kind of skills, qualifications. that's heavy in my book in terms of brain power used, etc., energy usage. Do you think that working that hard for that long in your what most people would call downtime, has that had an impact on why you want to reach financial independence so you can, I don't know, relax and stop doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The I think as part of doing all of these extra qualifications and stuff and working hard, I think I've it's definitely not something I would find sustainable like long term. And I don't do any any further qualifications, and I'm not planning on it. It definitely gets to the point where you do. I have found a few times I've been really ready to almost like burn out and just like, you know what, I would need to be off for like 6 months. And in between BT and Amazon, I did actually take a month off work, which was really nice actually.
I'm a big fan of gaps between jobs.
Yeah, because I think there's something about complete being free and not having anything on your mind regarding work. That's really helpful.
Where the creativity comes from, and that's where, like we've said 100 times before, have a little bit of an emergency fund, have some slush money somewhere. So there's a big difference between you leaving, say, Sky, for example, and having to take whatever next job arrives. But now you can choose what job, you can have a couple of weeks off, you can mentally switch over from one place to the next. And I think you just go in a much better, less stressed frame of mind. And it probably would make you perform better in the early days of working there. You're not just wishing and hoping for your paycheck.
100%. And I think, to that point where, I think I enjoy working and I enjoy my job at the minute. I think my rush to get to financial independence came certainly from when it was during COVID. I was doing the first time, because I went into this job in Treasury. I'd never done it before, and you almost start from scratch, and it's a very different, it's like talk to a different language. And I found that quite stressful. And to almost go back to then go, ultimately, I've then gone forward, having gone back, but that was stressful. But that's when I kind of discovered a lot of the financial independence stuff. And luckily I'd kind of from my training as in an accounting, I've always been fairly rational on top of my money anyway, but it almost superimposing that here's how a business runs its finances. I'm going to apply that logic to my personal finances with the goal in mind of becoming work optional. That for me was just that supercharged it. And I think it's, but looking and working in some of these big companies, and it does get hard, and there's a lot of politics and stuff. I get fed up sometimes, and I think that definitely is a motivator. But I think where I would see myself is I almost look at, my current. I should. I'm planning. I think I should have about 5 years left where I can then be work optional. So I'll be basically 40, which I think is a very good position.
It's incredible. I wish I could match that.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, it's never something I thought would happen. But then I think what I then see myself doing is still working in some form of capacity, but probably not in the massive corporate that never stops. It's maybe something a bit more like I'll just one of the other reasons of trying to build out broad skill set is maybe going in as like a consultant to help smaller companies build out a finance function, or go in and cover somebody's maternity for 9 months, for doing that for a little bit. And then ultimately, I enjoy, I think what I've learned, especially from like, writing the book and doing this podcast, is I really enjoy like educating and teaching, in a way. And potentially that's something for later down the line. But as we were chatting just before the recording, it would be like adult teaching as opposed to, or like university teaching as opposed to primary school or high school. I'd want an audience that is like kind of wanting to be there as opposed to, yeah, like 5-year-olds running around like trying to hit each other.
Whole different ball game.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I think as well from what you said, I genuinely hope you make it when you're around when you're 40. Even even if it's, I don't know, 2 years delayed at 42, to hit five at 42 is crazy. I don't think I'll ever get there. I think my trajectories, I'll be at least, my age will begin with a five. I think. And who
But
knows?
but
I don't
that's
know.
still amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's. I kind of remember to myself that it's not just me doing it. It's I'm kind of tag teamed with my wife now, and
Hmm.
if it was just me, it would be. I mean, I could be financially independent if I lived in a caravan off grid and didn't do much, but that's not life. And I'm very aware that I only get one life now, and I
Yeah.
don't want to waste the years that I have. I'm coming up to 36. I'll be 36 in 13 days. And I always use a birthday as a time of just kind of reflecting on where I've been for the year, what have I been doing, what have I achieved, kind of what processes or systems have I set in place. And of course, I enjoy the day, and I never ever work my birthday either. It's a hard pass for me on that, ever working
Yeah.
birthdays.
That's a good
So
idea.
yeah, I think, to be honest, every company should give their employees their birthday off as an
Yeah.
extra day, regardless. I think I heard Virgin do that at some point. I don't know. I just think it's a nice thing to do. So if I ever employ anyone, it'll just be automatic. Like, you're not working your birthday.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I wonder if, like, the idea of, because you're kind of slogging away now, not slogging, but you're doing a more stressful job, which obviously comes with higher pay, I hope, for you. But then using some of those skills, like, you're not just going to switch off and be like, oh, I don't need to know any of this accountancy stuff now. I'll just forget about it because I've now hit five. But you can give some of that back, and I think giving kind of that guidance and that knowledge to somebody who was you, and you'll be 40 and they'll be 20, and you can say, actually, this is the path I took. These are the pitfalls to avoid. This is something you might not have thought about. This is what I wish I knew when I was your age. And I think you're going to get an awful lot of value to yourself, but also to provide a lot of that value back to kind of the future generation of accountants.
Yeah, and that I think that's it. So when we do the study and we went through BPP college, and a lot of those the tutors are ex-profession, they worked in the industry and have then they're kind of um turning down their career before retiring. And there's some really inspirational people there. Like the one chap was he trained to be an accountant. He was like an auditor, but then he left to do his own business. With him and his partner set up a business importing like party toys from China and selling them, and it became like super successful. Sold the business, and then he's now he just does bits of consulting. He does the teaching as a bit of a side gig, and he's training to be a barrister.
What?
um, and
That's
so it was just, and he's like, as soon as we came in, he's like, right, congratulations, everybody, you're all going to be driving beige Volvos, like by the
mm,
time you finish. But it was really interesting, and one thing that always stuck in my mind was about like it's profitability is really important, and it isn't that he said I'd much rather have a business with £5 million of revenue and £1 million of profit than a business of 100 million and like $5 million of revenue. So it was sorry, $100 million of revenue and $5 million of profit, just because it's like the complexity and everything that goes with that. He's almost like, give me something nice and small and simple that's very profitable. And it's a thing of,
well, it's a 20% profit figure, isn't it? As opposed to a one
yeah,
percent
exactly, a
or
5%.
5% or something like that.
Yeah,
Five, yeah. This is why you do the maths and I don't,
yeah,
right?
but that was always that principle which stuck with me. And to your point, that he must get a load of value from teaching and imparting his knowledge on the yeah his journey and finance. And he's still and that guy, is 100% like financially independent. He could do what he wanted, but it's that thing of you still choose to work, but it's just in very different parts. And it isn't that pressure, like you said, of I'm leaving one job and I have to start on Monday, or else because I can't go 1 month without the next paycheck. And
It's huge. The amount of stress and weight physically, mentally that lifts off you is incredible. And it goes towards just the thinking about lifelong learning. So this chap's done all of his accountancy career in itself, which probably spans multi-decades. He's then stepped away, used some of that knowledge he has, those like transferable skills, to start importing party toys from China or whatever, however he's run that, because he's seen the ins and outs of businesses. He probably knows what works, what doesn't. Might have had some help along the way, who knows? And then to top all that off, he's been able to build that, sell it, and hopefully have a nice payday for the efforts you've put in. And then to top that off, he could be financially done, but he's like, no, actually, I want to be a barrister. So it gives you the options to, like, if you're intellectual enough to do that, it's not something I could do at all, but it gives you the options to train for that. And if you don't have to have a sponsor, if you have that much kind of cash flow, you can be like, I want to do it and I can afford it. So the only barrier is my own motivation, my own discipline to get it done. And you don't have someone else telling you no. And it sounds to me like he's kind of made good decisions in hindsight. He'll look back and think, actually, it's a life well lived.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think,
Even if he does have a beige Volvo.
funny enough, he used to drive a motorbike into central London, which is probably quite smart because you can get through the traffic. But
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, but I'm sure he's got a beige Volvo on the drive at home.
Maybe sparkling clean with an immaculate service history. Well,
Yeah, that's it.
if he has one and he ever wants to sell it to me,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll buy it. I feel like that's been we've gone 42 and a half minutes now. I feel like I've learned a lot about you, which is actually really nice. And also, I think it's a really good overview of what's possible with an accountancy or a finance kind of push in your career. Because I think some people are, and especially me, I'm guilty of thinking that all accountants are kind of bean counters and they just use abacuses all day and sit in boring offices and all wear pinstripe suits and stuff. And it's just it could not be further from the truth. And I'm just highlighting my own lack of knowledge and total ignorance in that area. But if you think about it on a wider point of view, all the companies that we interact with, the companies that we use for services to our house, the ones that we use kind of every day, they all have accountancy finance people to keep the lights on, to keep the wheels of the business turning, to employ people who live locally and around us in the community. So they really have like a huge impact. I'd hate to think of what would happen if all of that were to just disappear. I think we'd end up in a whole different ball game if all of that 21st century stuff were to just dissolve overnight. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
No, I mean, if there's any questions from any of the audience, yeah, please like drop us an email and we happily answer anything specifically. I'd just close by saying it's really worth considering as a career. It's you know the opportunities are only growing, and whether from even being on AI and stuff is going to have a big impact. It already is on a lot of like the day-to-day, how accountancy runs, how banking runs, a lot of the processes. Even if it's like from a tech standpoint, accountancy is really quite interesting area, right down to budgeting for headcount and investment appraisals or whatever. It's such a broad, varied career, and yeah, it's something that if you're keen on or even thinking about, yeah, I would recommend it, definitely. And it's been I've enjoyed my career so far. I enjoy the work I do. I find it valuable and I challenges me. And so it's yeah, I found it very good. And similar to you, Alex, I when I first started looking at it, the first thing that came to my head was you see like a chartered accountancy shop, like a shop front on a high street somewhere. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to do that. But then you open up this world of, yeah, and it's been so much more varied than I could have even thought of when I was applying for jobs. So
And unless you know those things, you're going to think about maybe that little shop that's got chartered accounts written on, and all the people in there have got dark suits, etc. And they do this mystery thing with money, and they just make stuff happen. But until you actually kind of lift the lid on what's possible for that, you don't really know. Like if you'd said to me, um, I've heard of like of those big four companies, I've wrote them down, but PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, and Ernest and something. I've only ever heard of KPMG out of those, and also Deloitte, only because you've mentioned it to me before. Without that, I wouldn't have any idea what they do. But it's it's kind of fascinated me that you can do so much. There's so much scope that you can do. It's yeah, and no, I appreciate you taking the time and having the idea, putting some notes down to bring something like that. So this has been episode 32. Next week I'll do my own version of that from a mental health nursing point of view, and my my story there will involve some coin flips and a hat. So I'll flesh that out a little bit more, and yeah, we'll see where that takes us. But Alex, thank you for bringing that. I appreciate it. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. If you do have any questions for Alex on accountancy, anything like that about his career, do wing us an email, which is nursingyourwaytowealth@gmail.com. And Alex will come back to you with hopefully some useful insights and knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, please reach out. Really keen. Yeah, I'll happily answer any question. And on the topic of insights and knowledge, I have I promised a few episodes ago about a sand fact
Oh,
to
you did,
counter yours,
and I
and so
forgot.
yeah, so just as a closing remark, as a random sand fact, so um, sand covers 20% of the Earth's land surface, and the tallest sand dune in the world is just over 4,000 feet tall, and it's in Argentina, and it's called the Duno Federico Curbus, which I'm sure is how the locals pronounce it. And
Absolutely.
that is taller than Table Mountain. There's a reference.
That's crazy. That wasn't in the book I read about sand.
Yeah. So that is the random sand fact uh, to
I love
close
it.
off
That's
close off
great.
this episode.
Well, I appreciate it. I think, and I was talking about
Yeah.
sand grains and size, and then you're like, here's a big old mountain of it in Argentina. There was a section in the book about Argentina, but I don't remember it mentioning it. Maybe it did, and I didn't remember it. Oh, great. That's a lovely sand fact. Thanks very much. I will, maybe not about sand, but I'll bring you a weird and wonderful fact, probably from the nursing field next week. And I think we should add that as an ongoing thing, just like a weird and wonderful fact that we've come up with or we've learned about the week before.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Cool. All right. See you next week, my friend. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.